Hello fellow lurkers, and to all those getting high on maxing out your damage, this video is for you. We'll run over the damage formula and see how to best add all the damage together into one massive crit. I'll go over the weapons effect, followed by the skills and spells. So let's not waste any time and start straight with the weapon formula. BAM! Look at this sucker. Don't worry, it's a little bit scary at first. We'll go through each step of the process to see how the various affixes will affect the 100 points of damage we're theorizing. And once we're done with the weapon, we'll move on to the skills. Once you understand the basics, it's actually not as scary as it looks. There's only a few damage modifiers that actually affect, and understanding how they stack is a lot simpler than having to stare at this formula. As stated before, we're going to take 100 damage and just plug that sucker into the start. And the first thing we'll have to look for is our attack power and dexterity, or intelligence. Remember, dex and intelligence will affect your weapon damage, depending on if you're using a melee or a ranged weapon. Melee users should only see dexterity, ranged users should only see intelligence, and the exception to that is going to be the cleric, which can wield both. So it should be a pretty straightforward process. To make the formula fairly simple, we're going to use 20 AP and 10 dexterity. So 20 AP turns into 80% increase, 10 dexterity turns into 20%, totaling up to 100% increased damage. Add all that together, multiply, and we have 200 damage overall. So that's a good starter, not bad. Should be fairly easy to reach those numbers. And now we can get into the multiplicative side of things and look at the increased elemental damage. This is going to be our first multiplicative modifier, and any modifier after this is also going to be multiplicative. So each element, including magic damage, does have their percentage increases. You'll see it on the weapons, you'll see it on the armors once they can actually roll mods, as well as the crystals that you're socketing into them. This is one of the last increases to damage, and one of the last that will be noticed on your actual character sheet. So again, to keep things simple, we're going to imagine that we have 50% increase to the weapon's elemental type. So we'll take the weapon's damage, multiply it by 1 plus 0.5, so that we have 200 times 1.5. Final score is 300 damage. And we're almost there, because there does exist added damages. Again, these added damages are going to be found on armors, crystals, and weapons. And these are going to be counted as physical damage. Because it's physical damage and not elemental damage, there's no percentage increases to the specific number. So it's only affected by the AP and, appropriately, dexterity or intelligence based on your character. So very simple, just like before. We're going to go ahead and imagine that we have 50 damage. Put that in 50 times 1 plus 0.8 plus 0.2 equals 50 times 2 equals 100 damage. Boom. Alright, so do huge asterisks right here, huge asterisks. This is the and signs in the formula before. There are two sources of added damage that are not affected by any modifiers. This is the added damage that is sourced from conversion of armor into damage, and these are found on only the Divine Shine and the Cleric's Divine Circlet. Any conversion items that transform the armor into flat attack damage are counted outside of any increases we've discussed previously. In the formula, it's excluded and put right at the end, alone, sad, and neglected, nerfed into the ground to never recover, which is exactly where it should be. And because it's down, buried, and dead, I'll consider this, like most of the community, unworthy and useless, and not even consider it in the calculations. Secretly though, it's still actually a pretty good stat and a decent increase if you actually work around with it. But for the purpose of simplicity, we'll just ignore this and move on to the next step of the calculation. So now we can add it all together and see how much damage we're actually doing. So we have 300 plus 100 equals 400. Simple as that. With the 100 base and 50 added, you can see that the damage can scale quite quickly and easily into higher numbers. But it can go even higher. There is one last modifier before the end of everything, and that is the percentage to monster type. the final multiplier. That's right. Those percentage increases to undead or to demons, this does affect every type of damage added to your hits. So this affects the Divine Shine and Divine Circlet. This affects the plus added physical damage and the base elemental or magic damage of your weapon. So we'll go ahead and imagine we have 50% damage to undead monsters and that we're actually hitting an undead monsters. Now we take our 400 from before, multiply that by 1.5, and suddenly we're at 600 damage. Yet another threshold of damage. We've transformed 150 damage into something 4 times higher with all of these small incremental increases. Not bad when you actually consider all of that. There is one caveat to consider. If you do not increase your damage past the armor threshold of your enemy, you will need to consider armor penetration affixes. This really should only apply to characters that are hitting enemies with very small damages on each hit, so consider this for spraying ones, though with the way armor is working on a quite lovely bell curve fashion, once you reach certain thresholds, the armor of the monsters will be less and less effective, just like your own. So the bigger the hit, the less you have to consider armor penetration. The smaller the hit, the more interesting armor penetration will be. And that's pretty much all you need to consider. Add just enough AP, find an affix with the proper elemental damage, and add in some demon and undead damage, and suddenly you're hitting 4 times stronger than what the weapon actually is. That's pretty awesome. Now, how does this affect skills? Well, skills are actually a bit more simple. You can take out the added damage because added damage only applies to weapons, and so you're left with just the skills base times AP and dexterity or intelligence, whichever is on your character. Both of them seem to apply to skills, so that's pretty awesome. Multiply by the element and multiply by the monster type, and you're all done. So now that you've mastered the art of min-maxing your weapon, throwing in another curveball, adding that weapon damage to your skills-based damage, and here you'll realize something amazing. We have to reuse the entire weapon formula just to add the weapon damage into it. And you'll actually notice something interesting. The elemental percentage damage is actually affecting it twice. So if you've got 70% increased lightning damage and you're using a lightning wand and a lightning skill, that wand's base damage is going to be increased by 150%, not 75%. At least so far with my testing. So that's pretty awesome. Let's look at the formula. There you go. Easy, right? Oh, no, hang on. Come on. Sit down, take it easy. I can simplify this. Okay, open up your character sheet. There you go. See that number, your damage number? Use that. Now our formula is...
What? Stop it.
Which is a little bit less scary. But as you can see, the AP and Dex and elemental increases are actually applied twice. This was tested using Divine Shine. Actually, of all things, Divine Shine is affected by AP and Dex multipliers and elemental increases. So when you've got however much added flat damage, you increase it by that elemental damage, suddenly Divine Shine is looking pretty good again. Anyways, let's go through this together just so that we're all on the same page. We're going to imagine that this isn't a critical hit, and as such ignore the critical multipliers just like before, and let's just go through this. So skill damage, make it easy, we'll say it's 100. Sheet damage, we'll say that's about 200. Conversion rate, so this is what the skill says your weapon damage is being included on, like the staggering amulets, 25% is what we're going to be using in this value. So same values for attack power and dexterity as above, which comes out to a 2 times multiplier. And let's put everything in here. All right, convert. Okay, so we have 300 times 50% electric damage times 50% monster damage. So that gives us 450 times the 50% monster damage, and we come out to 675 damage. So once more, the increases and multipliers do wonders and turn 150 flat damage into like 4.5 times the actual damage. As you can see, you don't necessarily need to be chasing after nothing but attack power. Adding in some elemental damage, adding in some monster damage, that's going to increase your damage quite well already. There's, of course, all kinds of variations, depending on if you're using a multi-shot or a spraying wand. Melee weapons are pretty straightforward. The listed damage is going to be what's actually happening, except for concussive, which can actually hit twice, one for the projectile and one for the melee hits. But overall, this will give you a good idea and planning for what stat you need to go after next. In any case, it's helped me understand that I don't need to have nothing but attack powers. Finding the right elemental attributes is actually going to be quite helpful as well. So I hope this has helped you in the long run as well. Thanks for attending this course in mathematics of It Lurks Below. I hope to see you again in my next course, whichever that may be. We'll have to see what the administration decides. But to be sure not to miss a lesson, do subscribe. If you enjoyed the lesson from today, leave a comment, like. Any questions, I'll be happy to answer to the best of my abilities. And as always, I'll see you down below.